Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's it. Oh.
Great.
Can everybody see that?
Yep, thank you. So just a quick introduction. Up next is Paul Breen. This is a lesson in using passive voice, specifically English and Ireland, or England and Ireland. So Paul, thank you so much for joining, and take it away.
Okay. So this is a lesson from our pre-sessional course, our summer course for international students. And it's originally a 3-hour lesson, so I've condensed it down to about 30 minutes. So I don't know how my timings will be, but hopefully you learn something about things that are made in Britain, and as well just get a sense of what we do in English for academic purposes and how we try and, you know, bridge that gap between academia and English language teaching. So, okay, so there's background information about me. I work for the University of Westminster as a senior lecturer, and there are my contact details, though I haven't actually been in the building for 3 months, thanks to our friend COVID-19. And everything I do now is online and working from home. So what we're going to do for this session is just look at the use of the passive voice in formal academic language, and then look at an everyday example of how it's used by talking about things that are made in Britain and the British Isles. Though I always explain that actually Irish people don't like that term, and I don't like it, but I just use it for the purposes of this lesson. And then what we would have done in normal circumstances would be to finish off with a writing task. So if anybody wants to do that for homework, you're quite welcome to do that. But I'm not going to mark it, I have to say. A bit busy with running the pre-sessional. Okay, so this is just an example of the passive voice. So it has often been argued that chocolate is bad for a person's teeth. However, new research has suggested that chocolate can have health benefits. For example, when chocolate is eaten regularly, a person's mood appears to become better. Medical experiments have proven that if people are happier, their heart rates show improvement over a period of time. Perhaps then we should all eat Mars bars more often. I actually taught in Korea for a couple of years, and I used to do that every afternoon in between my lessons, and I had a very expensive dental bill at the end of it. So maybe I'm not recommending eating Mars bars every day, but this is the structure of the passive, which is very common in academic writing. Increasingly though, you know, this is very formal, and it takes a lot of the emphasis away from the subject to more impersonal language, to the object. So it's not used all the time within academia, but it's one of the most common linguistic devices that we teach our students on our pre-sessional courses. So maybe some more examples of how the passive voice might be used in academia. And again, I have chosen something which unfortunately is all too familiar to us. Our friend, again, COVID-19, I should say our enemy actually, of course. So we don't really have time to do this now, but I'll just, in a class situation, I would get my students to think of some example sentences in the passive about the COVID-19 virus. So we'd give them some time to do that. Sorry. So here are some of the example sentences that I would show to students. The search for a COVID-19 vaccine has been undertaken in different parts of the world. Unfortunately, we still haven't found one, but hopefully it's coming soon. A new strain of the virus was discovered in the spring of 2020, and patients are isolated and treated in special wards within hospitals. Further information about the origins of the illness has been released into the public domain. Now, one of the things that we try to do in our academic English classes, though, is we try to make things more engaging for the students. So then in this session, I'm going to move away a little bit from sort of formal academic type activities to things that are more fun. If I can get the slide to move. Okay, all right. So very often passive voice is used to talk about processes or things that are made in a particular country. So I mentioned one of the countries that I taught in where I ate a lot of Mars bars, which were bad for my teeth. Thankfully, this was a lot better. This is one of my favorite foods, actually. So I can't bring the chat up for some reason here, but you can guess yourself in what country you would find this traditional meal and the side dishes. So you might know this. With full screen, as I say, I haven't got the chat facility up.
I think it's bibimbap from
Yep.
Turkey.
Yeah, exactly right. Is that
Yep.
Melanie? No. Okay. Yeah, bibimbap. And it's a South Korean dish. And it's made from rice, vegetables, egg, and sometimes meat as well. And in the background, you can also see some side dishes such as kimchi. Kimchi is a really spicy cabbage that you get in South Korea. So again, it's grown, produced, and sold in South Korea. And you get this with every meal in Korea. Probably if you're not used to it, it does taste very spicy. But when you've spent some time in Korea and in China as well, because I've been working in China quite a bit recently in the last couple of years, you get used to very spicy food. So the next activity, again, would probably be best if we had the chat function, but it's just to give you a sense of what we do in EAP. So you're going to see a list of products and you have to think of the places where they are made. So you have to match the products to the country. So for example, if you think that we make sushi in Ireland, then you would put that in there. But we don't tend to make sushi in Ireland. We're not that skilled in our cuisines, or some of us aren't. So I guess in a normal 3-hour session, we would give people 5 or 10 minutes to work together on this in their groups, and there'd be a lot of interaction, but we can't really have that here. So here's the answers with everything in the passive voice form. So sushi is made in Japan. Guinness beer is brewed in Ireland, and it's one of our most famous exports. I probably should have said that at the start, actually. I'm originally from Ireland, even though I'm based in London. Thai noodles are eaten in Thailand. The pyramids are found in Egypt. Kilts are worn in Scotland, and you might have seen the picture of Mel Gibson in Braveheart. So he's wearing a kilt there. Bollywood films are made in India. Arabian coffee is sold in Saudi Arabia. Cricket is played in England during the summer, though this summer we're not likely to have any sports, unfortunately. Gold and diamonds are exported from South Africa. Samsung televisions are made in South Korea, so they don't just make bibimbap. Lots of toys are manufactured in China. Kangaroo burgers are cooked in Australia. Sugarcane is grown in Jamaica. Famous wines are made in France, and Roman ruins are found in Italy. So, being Irish, I'm going to pick out the Irish marker sentence. And that sentence is Guinness beer is brewed in Ireland. And here, down in the bottom of the screen, by the fish and chips and a roaring fire, you can see a pint of Guinness. So it's very characteristic, very black beer with white foam on the top. But you're not learning about Guinness, even though that might be preferable sometimes. Today we're looking at the passive voice. So the way that we form the passive is we use the passive subject plus the verb to be plus the past participle of the main verb. So Guinness beer is the passive subject, verb to be is, and then the past participle of the verb to brew is brewed. So Guinness beer is brewed in Ireland. But actually a bit of cultural knowledge as well. We don't call Guinness a beer, so it's so well known, and it's a particular type of drink anyway, known as stout. So we just say Guinness is brewed in Ireland. But because you might not know what Guinness is, I've chosen to put in the word beer as well. Okay, so as I said, this was part of a much longer lesson actually, where we introduced students to various aspects of culture and lots of different cities and parts of Britain and Ireland. So I don't really have time for that today, but you'll get a sense of how diverse and how varied Britain actually is, because we do this at the start of the course as well, because our students come to Britain with a lot of stereotypes. I mean, you know, some people have graduated from King's College here apparently, and I actually graduated up north in Manchester, even though I work in London. And so I know from talking to students who come to Britain, when they first get here, they have a lot of stereotypes or impressions about what it's like, and very often they don't realize the great diversity in region and ethnicity and even in food. So many people have these stereotypes, or many of my students anyway, have these stereotypes of the British and Irish diet, that we eat a lot of fried food, which is true in some cities, some places, some parts of cities. A lot of fish and chips, and we drink a lot of beer, eat crisps, and eat sandwiches. Again, there is truth to this, but we also have a lot more diversity, and that's one of the things that I want you to take from this lesson as well. The fact that, you know, the Britain that sometimes you see portrayed on broadcasters like the BBC, it's sometimes quite different to the one that you find when you come here as a student and you realize, you know, how multicultural and how rich in a different kind of history the city and the country is. So just one of the great things about living in London as well is we have such diversity and we have such access to restaurants. I mean, a friend of mine, an English teacher as well, he and his partner, one year, they decided to spend the entire year going out to a different restaurant from a different country each week. And there's so many different restaurants and different types of cuisine in London that you could actually probably spend 2 or 3 years doing that. So this picture is from one of the courses that we run in the University of Westminster, which is a sociology course in food. So it's a module in the study of food. And what the students do is, instead of spending their time in the classroom, they spend their time out in the streets of London, exploring how the food is connected to the different parts of London. For example, you might have heard of Brick Lane, which is where a lot of the Bangladeshi community moved to. And there's an incredibly amazing range of curry houses and other types of restaurant from that part of South Asia to be found there. And so the students will go there and they will look at the different types of cuisine and how that connects to the culture of the area, and how in many ways things like that, by giving the British people such a positive experience of food and their culture, groups like the Bangladeshi community have become more integrated into British society. So this is a really good course, and I would talk more about that if I was in a 3-hour lesson, but I won't. And then as well, there are other parts of England or other things that maybe people aren't readily aware of when they first come here as students. Different regions of England have got their own types of food. Probably not as delicious. Sorry if anyone's from Liverpool or Middlesbrough that I'm about to mention, but the food's probably not as diverse there as it is in Brick Lane, or as delicious. But scouse is a type of food that is made in Liverpool, and in a town called Middlesbrough, further up in the north, they make another food called parmo. So I would show the students these, but we don't have time today. And again, there is the traditional, we call it the traditional Irish breakfast. In England, they call it the traditional English breakfast. And I guess up in Scotland, they call it the traditional Scottish breakfast. So we all fight for ownership of this delicious meal, which isn't always appreciated maybe by our international students. So again, Devonshire Cream Tea, just looking at the time. Okay, Devonshire Cream Tea is something else that is drunk in England. So it's drunk at the seaside in Devon, and scones are eaten with this. So again, you can see how the passive is used. So you have Devonshire Cream Tea as your passive subject, and then the verb to be, and then drunk. So Devonshire Cream Tea is drunk at the seaside in Devon, and scones are eaten with this. So the idea is students will see this and you will remember this structure, because you will have this association with food, which is easier to remember than a lot of very abstract, very serious sentences, maybe about scientific discoveries or that sort of thing. Oh, my slide won't go on. Okay. So again, Yorkshire pudding, and we had York mentioned in the previous session. So Yorkshire pudding actually comes from Yorkshire, and it is made in Yorkshire, which gives it its name, and it is eaten as part of the traditional English Sunday roast. Okay, and something else, eels. This is a London delicacy. So eels were eaten in the East End of London. These were caught in the River Thames, and they were cooked to be eaten, usually in raw form, in a dish called jellied eels. Okay, that's a picture, and you probably know this guy, quite famous in both Britain and America and the rest of the world. So David Beckham, who is from the East End of London, and here he is eating eels, though not the jellied kind. Now, this is another exercise that I give to the students, usually after we have had some teaching about Scotland. So there's a whole chunk of the lesson that I've actually taken out. But again, I haven't got the chat up here, but can anyone guess what this is? Well, I'll just say the type of guesses that I usually get are sausages, pastries, some kind of chocolate dessert, or fish as well. But actually, it's something that is eaten in Scotland. And that's why in the beginning, I showed the picture of the Mars bar and told the story of when I was teaching in Korea, which was actually true. I didn't make that up. So this is a deep fried Mars bar. So you boil the Mars bar in oil and then you eat it. Now, it's a very, very high calorie meal. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. So, as I say, usually students will guess that, back again. Usually the students will guess that it's some kind of sausage or chicken, but actually it's a tourist novelty. Or it started out as a tourist novelty in either the cities of Glasgow or possibly Dundee. And it's a very, very high calorie meal. There's actually lots of newspaper articles about this, and people are discussing how many calories are in each bar. Some people say it's much more than 900. But you can imagine the chocolate is already quite high in calories, and if it's boiled in oil, it's going to be worse. But it's a cultural experience. I've never tried it. So now what I want you to do just for a couple of minutes is think about how you would make this deep fried Mars bar. So this is an exercise not just in using the passive voice, but it's also an exercise in critical thinking. So you have to think, okay, if I said to you now, I want a deep fried Mars bar for my dinner, how would you make it for me? So you have these 3, 5, 7, you've got these 8 steps. In what order would you put the steps? So if you think about that for a couple of minutes, and then I'll show you the answers. Again, in class, we would normally work in groups and, have discussions and so on. But you can just do it on your own for a minute or two. Okay, because I'm conscious of time, these are the steps that you would go through in order to make a Mars bar deep fried. So you can see that everything again is in the passive. So the Mars bar is put in a freezer. After a few weeks, it is taken out of the freezer. Oil is boiled in a saucepan. A very high temperature is reached. The cold Mars bar is dropped into the boiling oil. After about 30 seconds, the Mars bar is taken out. The deep fried Mars bar is left to cool, and the high calorie meal is then eaten. And actually, students love doing this exercise because it does require a lot of critical thought. Okay. Now, again, I'm conscious of time, but what we would do at this stage of the lesson is get students to do a few exercises in the use of the passive voice. So we would keep the theme of food, and then also, again, teaching them a bit about culture. Because it's based in London, we also encourage our students to go out and experience the city and live the city. So this is Greenwich Park, which is not too far from where I live or where I'm currently trapped, thanks to our present circumstances. So I'll just show you the answers rather than, waiting to try and do it because we don't have enough time. So breakfast is served early in the morning. Eggs are fried or boiled. Toast is eaten with the eggs. Tea is drunk with breakfast. Dogs are walked twice a day because they don't usually walk by themselves. Somebody has to walk them. They're first walked early in the morning. They're taken to a large area such as a park, and they aren't allowed to walk without a collar and lead. Okay. And again, if you ever come to London, I would certainly recommend that you go to Greenwich Park, because not just because it's near me and it's good for the local economy or whatever, but it is a really, really nice part of the world, very scenic. And it's quite sad that, this is probably the first summer that I won't be able to go there and relax a lot because of the situation. So a few more examples. These are maybe a little bit more difficult. And again, if we had time, I would give the students a few minutes to do this themselves and then sort of check the answers or whatever. Okay, so the royal family are born as important people. The reason we don't say were born is that we can assume that unless there's a revolution in England, which is quite unlikely, they are going to continue being born as important people. So like it's an ever-present kind of truth. So the royal family are born as important people. The king is not chosen by the ordinary people. The choice of king is decided by birth, and the eldest son is selected as the king, though they have changed the law, and now the eldest daughter can become the queen. Throughout history, women were not allowed to become the queen if they had brothers, which was, institutional sexism. But that has changed, which seems quite fair to me. Yeah. Good English footballers are bought and sold for lots of money nowadays. Millions of pounds is earned by Premier League footballers because we're not counting the pounds individually. The best players are asked to play for their countries, and young players are taught in special football academies. And again, just more examples that we use for reinforcement and to teach the students important things on British culture, because we also encourage our students to watch the news, to watch TV, watch things like soap operas and TV shows in English, because that really helps you to learn. And actually, I have had cases, for example, of a Polish student of mine who had a perfect London accent, East London accent, well, not really East London, but generally London accent, from watching Eastenders. She talked like an actress on Eastenders, simply because she watched the show all the time. So Eastenders is another soap opera like Coronation Street. So News at 10 is shown on ITV every night in Britain. This is out of date now, but the news stories are presented by Trevor MacDonald. Coronation Street is watched by millions of viewers, and Coronation Street was first broadcast in the 1950s. So these are again examples of not just how the passive is used, but also a good way of learning about Britain and about British culture, because the News at 10 was very much a British institution, and Coronation Street as well was one of the first soap operas, which are very popular with British people. And actually, again, just talking, just in terms of learning about British culture, and a thing that is quite important in the present climate. Trevor MacDonald was the first Black broadcaster to appear on the news, on mainstream news channels in the 1970s. So, in terms of trying to be a more diverse society, Britain has made a lot of effort in that area to kind of overcome some of the more negative aspects that it first experienced when, you know, we had race issues in the 50s and 60s and so on. So that's one of the things we always try and show our students as well, about the diversity in Britain. And you know, this lesson hopefully will give you as students and any other students who see it a sense of the, not just things that are made and done in Britain, but an awareness of what the broader society is like. And well, unfortunately, from my point of view, I don't be political, but it has maybe regressed in recent times, but you know, we can hope for better days. So again, going back to Guinness beer, so that's the end of the lesson, and I hope that everybody has a good weekend. And that is Barack Obama, who actually has Irish ancestors as well. Anyone with any degree of Irish ancestry is claimed by the Irish, so we claim Barack Obama. And
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for that. That was really, there were some just great examples for us, and really good examples of using passive. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who has attended and is watching. We are going to just take a real quick break and flip on over to our next presenter. Let me just pull up, but before we do, I do just want to pull up and make a request for any donations to these food bank charities, or even your local food bank. If you can donate money, we ask that you do. If you can't, we totally understand. But I did want to just bring your attention back to the point that one of our goals is to raise money for food banks.